This is all theater. This is all just political theater.
Political theater. Political theater.
Pure political
theater.
Theater.
Political theater.
The
nefarious,
Significant and protracted
political theater for political theater's sake.
I yield back.
From Washington, this is Political Theater, Roll Call's review of the spectacle of politics on Capitol Hill and across the country. I'm Jason Dick. Welcome back to Political Theater. It has been a week of theatrics. We had the joint address earlier this week. President Donald Trump delivered his first joint address of his second term to Congress. It was a little raucous, even by Trumpian standards. We had some protests that we saw from Democrats, one of which resulted in the censure of a member of Congress, Democrat Al Green, for standing up and telling him that he did not have a mandate. There have been also reactions from the Republican side to some of the more unpopular parts of the Trump agenda in town halls in the previous weeks leading up to this. And I was just curious. I wanted to talk to our friend, Nathan Gonzales, editor, publisher, founder of Inside Elections, and our elections analyst at Roll Call, what he thought about the different approaches the parties are taking to basically policy disagreements. So, Nathan, welcome back to Political Theater. I know that we have you for a short period of time because you are doing important stuff in the Midwest and you need to catch a plane. But that's not before we can grab you for this podcast, and also not before we can talk about your T-shirt at the drive-in.
Yeah, well, and I think I'm at the nicest Embassy Suites I've ever been in. The Embassy Suites, Nashville, downtown. Not sponsored, but in a very nice property, I'll say. I should state also not Midwest, Mid-South, I think is the more appropriate term. You're going to get Nashville. So, for those of you who are watching, I have at the drive-in shirt. Yeah, I've got this. I got this shirt in college, but the tie-in for Capitol Hill is that I believe that former Congressman, former presidential candidate, former Senate candidate Beto O'Rourke played in a band with future members of At the Drive-In. So it's not just a random, apparel. Like, there is a tie-in here.
There is a tie-in, much like Blue Harvest, your Blue Harvest T-shirt.
There you go. Always purpose.
So let's start with the Democrats along these lines. In the lead up to Trump's address, there was an op-ed by James Carville, the Democratic political strategist, sort of lion in winter, if you will. But he did successfully shepherd Bill Clinton into office and has had quite a storied career. Anyway, he wrote this op-ed that went in the New York Times and basically stated Democrats should play dead. They should let Republicans sort of do what they're going to do over the course of the next few months and year. Let it all play out. Let people see how unpopular this is, because a lot of what they're proposing to do, whether it's cuts to Medicaid and so forth, is not popular. And it certainly didn't come with some sort of like huge popular mandate. The president's statements notwithstanding, he did win very narrowly. He did win, but he won narrowly. It was not any kind of landslide. But the truth is that Democrats don't have any power. They don't really have the ability to stop a lot of this stuff. And so the Carville's advice was just let them screw it up, and then we'll hit it really hard with the Virginia governorship race, which Abigail Spanberger, former House member, is sort of the front runner for right now, and then we can head to the midterms. But don't waste your time getting bogged down in defending DEI policies and stuff like that. So there's that, and then on the other hand, there is the sort of calls for mass resistance, which we saw a little bit of at the joint address, where people had signs, they saying things like false and Elon Musk is stealing, and Al Green got up and wagged his cane at Donald Trump and was kicked out of the chamber, and because this is what they say their constituents are telling them that they need to do is to mess with the Republicans at every possible chance. Politically, as an elections analyst, Nathan, what do you think is the more effective strategy for Democrats?
First, I'm not convinced that it has to be an either or strategy. There's probably a place for both of them. But if when I'll say when Democrats succeed in the future, I don't think it's a matter of if, but when, it will probably because Republicans overreached and there is a backlash against what they were doing. I mean, politicians do a poor job of contemplating or interpreting election results, and Republicans certainly believe that they have a mandate. When it was probably the 2024 elections were probably more about dissatisfaction with the status quo. People didn't think the country was heading in the right direction. They didn't feel the economy was secure, and so they voted against a current member of the administration and Vice President Kamala Harris, and also President Biden. But obviously, Republicans believe they have a mandate, and I guess I'm erring more toward the Carville approach, but that is frustrating for some Democrats who feel the need, like, well, Trump is doing all of this stuff. We gotta do something. And so I can see where there's an uneasiness with not only what's going on, but there's no leader of the Democratic Party. Maybe the Democrats have to be aware or cognizant of, they don't want Congressman Green to be the face of the Democratic Party, right? That's not going to go well. But I don't know, Jason. It also depends on outcomes. It depends on how do these policies end up affecting Americans and voters, and if it ends up being, disastrous, then what Congressman Green did in this speech might end up looking heroic, right? He will look like, more people should have been doing that. But if the final results or the outcomes of these policies that Trump and the Republicans are doing, if it ends up helping the country or not being a disaster, then it's going to look different with hindsight.
And I wonder also if we're just in a time where the biggest effects are not obvious right now. I mean, I do have a theory that one of the reasons that Trump and Musk and company went after USAID first is that there is obviously a big constituency for foreign aid, particularly in Washington, but the people who benefit the most from it and have the most clear benefit of it are on the other side of the world, and they're not, that they don't necessarily have nightly news coverage, and they're, if you cut off aid to them, you have a scramble in their lives, and it's horrific. But it's not it's not something as visceral as the price of eggs, which
Right.
has become this metaphor for the economy now. But when you see the effects of people being fired left and right at the Veterans Affairs Department, and you see veterans start to wait longer for services, for medical services, or you see wildfires get out of control because they have no seasonal employees to fight fires in the Forest Service anymore, things like that, that tends to hit home a little bit more, to in people's lives. But we may be a ways off from that because of just how long it takes to get money from one place to another.
And we heard in Trump's speech, Biden, right? We heard him blame Biden, and he probably gets a few more months of that opportunity. But when we get to later this year or into next year, it's going to be harder to blame Biden. Trump's core supporters are going to be with him no matter what. But for those Democrats will be against him no matter what. But for those independents, time will run out on the opportunity to blame Biden for the current problems, and he'll be judged on the merits of his own actions. But the tension that we're seeing on Capitol Hill is that Trump has less to lose than Republicans on the Hill. Republicans are going to face voters in 2026. Right. Trump is not going to face voters in 2026. So he's playing, I think, a lot faster and looser than what you're seeing from these members. But one of the approaches that we haven't really mentioned, Jason, is Senator Alyssa Slotkin of Michigan, who gave the response and was kind of in between those two options that you gave me at the beginning, right? It was fairly optimistic, but realistic. And I think she helped herself. Well, first of all, she didn't become an SNL. It's going to be hard to be an SNL feature because of her responses. Some previous responders have fallen into that before, but I think she elevated herself in a way that that approach, and she will be a part of the conversation about how Democrats are going to respond.
And I wonder if some of the theatrics or the protests are for the base, with Democrats, because again, as you said, like Democrats are typically going to oppose Trump. Trump's most hardcore supporters are going to support him. The independents that decide elections are going to be focused on, like, does life suck for me right now? Like, because I'm not necessarily, I've got better things to do than watch the joint address to Congress on Tuesday night. But I am aware that, like, my grandfather got denied care at the VA because they just fired 80,000 people or whatever. Like, I don't know. Like,
Yeah. And Jason, how honest are we being on this podcast? I have to admit, so on Tuesday night, I started watching the speech. Then I had to go pick up my daughter from theater rehearsal. And so I was listening to it on the radio. And then I came back and I was watching the speech. And then I had to put a kid to bed. And then I'm like, is this speech still? I was like, is this the replay or is he still
still going? Still going.
So, but I think what Democrats still haven't really fully wrestled with is that President Trump and now Elon Musk get a much bigger benefit of the doubt and much more of an opportunity to act because they are viewed as not politicians, that they are viewed as outside the government. They're viewed as successful businessmen. And I don't care. People can argue about whether they are or are not successful, but voters are giving them more of a chance or believe them more than if a congressman stands up and is protesting Elon Musk. I'd say a majority of Americans right now probably side with Elon because they think that, well, he's got the answers. Government is broken. Government is even corrupt. And so we need to look for someone outside of it. That's just the dynamic that Democrats have to figure out in their responses, how to not defend the government or how to get voices that are outside.
Yeah. Let's talk about the Republicans. There's some reporting that's come out over the last week, that Richard Hudson, who's the chairman of the Republicans' campaign arm in the House, and with the blessing of the Speaker and other leaders, has told their Republican members, don't do town halls. There were a series of town halls in the previous week where people were challenged on some of the more unpopular things that were happening. The speaker sort of dismissed them as like, oh, these are Democratic activists, just like riling things up. Don't do these. Just do Facebook Live or teletown halls. That's not a great look, I don't think, but I'm, when a member, it looks like they're afraid to meet their constituents. But there may be some truth to there being some professional protesters and plants, but in general, that doesn't seem to work out well for anybody. When you look at previous times like 2010, when Democrats were dealing with this, with the Tea Party, in 2017, when the first group of Trump resistance people were starting to show up at town halls, the majority in the House lost the majority in the next election. Is this a good strategy to just do Facebook Live with your constituents,
or just the teletown halls that are more controlled? I think it's a risky strategy. You laid it out. The Republicans are convinced that these are Democratic plants. These are George Soros funded people. And, I'm not at all these town halls. I don't ask every town hall person, town hall goer whether they're being paid or not. But I think Republicans are risking missing critical feedback that they might want to respond to or be able to respond to, either rhetorically or with their what they're actually doing with their legislation. And it's sort of like, maybe I'll try to make a comparison to voter fraud, that if there is widespread payment of people to all of these town hall, all of these people are Democratic plants, then we probably would have heard from one of them, or so one of them say, hey, here's the receipt right here. Right. Here is how much. And so, yeah, I do believe there is some organization, but it's just hard to believe that there's part of this that is not organic. And so right now, Republicans are viewed as more in touch, or at least Trump is viewed as more in touch with the problems that the country is facing. And I think Republicans benefit from that. But if they are just going to tune out and tune away and walk away, it's a risky strategy.
I also just think that there is a problem thinking that the most honest feedback people are getting is on Twitter or X or whatever, or other social media platforms, because that I mean, yes, a lot of people are on social media, but it's not as big a thing as you think when it comes to public forums. I mean, if somebody takes the time to go to a town hall meeting, a VFW, and meet their member of Congress, again, not everybody can be paid. That'd take a lot of money to get a lot to bust them in, if you will. And for people to make the effort to do that, to go there in person and do that, being on social media is easy. It is frictionless. Getting up, off the couch, going and confronting your member of Congress because you see that something is happening that you don't agree with, that takes more effort. And I think that turning your back on that, wanting to be away from that, placing yourself in the bubble, there's a real risk.
Yeah. Republicans, they have an opportunity, right? They have the trifecta, but it might be if they don't handle it well, both with what they're doing or legislatively or through executive orders, then it could be a very short window that they have this chance to pass, anything significant. Because if Democrats win the House in 2026, you think there's even less is going to get done in that circumstance.
Well, Nathan, I know you got to catch a plane, but thank you for sharing your thoughts. Do you want to stick around for the word of the week? It is just a word of the week.
I'll do it. I feel like now it's a tradition. I feel like I need to. All right, lay it on us.
So the word of the week is censure. And I thought this was appropriate because of Al Green's protests in the House chamber at the joint address. He is brought up on an underprivileged resolution for censure in the House, and people may wonder, well, what does that mean? Well, thankfully, we have Congressional Quarterly's American Congressional Dictionary with a rather extensive and interesting definition that I will read now. Censure is the strongest formal condemnation of a member for misconduct short of expulsion. A House usually adopts a resolution of censure to express its condemnation, after which the presiding officer reads its rebuke aloud to the member in the presence of his colleagues. Under a rule of the House Democratic Caucus, a censured Democratic representative loses his committees and subcommittee chairmanships for the remainder of the Congress. That's a bygone thing from, I don't know if that's in any kind of rules package now still. The authority of the Congress to censure stems from the constitutional provision permitting it to punish its members for disorderly behavior. Most House censures have been applied in cases of unparliamentary language, assaults on other members, or insults to the House by introducing offensive resolutions. Others have dealt with corrupt acts of one kind or another, taking kickbacks from staff, and sexual misconduct. The House has sometimes ended the proceedings when members have apologized after censure procedures were initiated against them. There were no apologies from Al Green.
Yeah, well, I think it was intentional.
That's kind of the point.
Right? Yeah. I think he had already picked up his jacket or something before the sergeant at arms staff even got to him.
Senators have been censured for disloyalty during the Civil War, fist fights on the floor, insulting remarks to colleagues, and accepting stock for legislative favors. So it came up just this week because of the House voting on the censure resolution of Al Green. So that's this episode's word of the week.
Very timely, as usual, Jason. Very timely.
Well, again, Nathan, go catch your plane. Eat some hot chicken on your way out at the airport, I'm sure. And we'll see you back here. And we'll see you back here, listeners, and those who view us on YouTube in the next episode of Political Theater.